Hello everyone. This video is about JavaScript, and I'm just going to give an introduction into JavaScript. I'm going to go over a few buttons and I'll show you how it works and how it links to HTML. Right, let's get started. First of all, let's have a look at the code that we've got here. I've got a standard kind of basic web page, and I've got these lines of code here, which are the important lines of code. We have button, which is this button up here. And we've got this span tag, which is holding this 0 here. And then we've got a second button that is connected to this button up here. Now, I haven't finished all of the code because I'm going to add the code in as we go along so you can see what's going on. Now, the other thing I've got here is I've got a script linking to JavaScript. Now, this is how you link to the JavaScript. It's in a scripting tag, and you have source src equals, and then you've got the file path of where you're keeping your JavaScript, and then of course the closing tag. And now, if I look into that, I haven't got much in here at the moment because I am leaving it until we add the code. We're going to talk about the code, and then we're going to add bits of code, and then you can see how things are working. So first of all, JavaScript is event driven. That means something happens and then that drives the code, because at the moment the code's just sitting there. It's quite happy doing nothing. Yeah. And if I push that button there, nothing happens because nothing is linked. And we have linkage between the HTML and the JavaScript. And now, how do we do that linkage? Right. Okay. So in this button here, and you have to give the type button. It's just good practice to do that. I have this piece of code here. On click equals up counter. So this is referring to a function that is in the JavaScript. So if we go look at the JavaScript, and I have this counter here, up function, up counter. Now there's nothing in there at the moment. Now what I want it to do is I want it to, if I zoom in now, I want it so that when I push next, this counter goes up by 1 each time. And then when I press previous, it comes down. So we're just going to work on next right now. How would we go about doing this? Well, what's this bit of code that we've got up here? We have counter equals 0. And I've also got this line of code here. And actually that line of code's not really doing anything where it is. So if I take that out, and I'm going to pop that into here, and we're going to have a closer look at this. So you've got document get element by number box, inner HTML, and counter. Well, this counter is referring to this counter up here. This get element by ID, this here is the ID. So what it's doing is it's saying, look for the HTML code and then find one with that ID. And this span tag has that ID. So that's what that's referring to. What it's going to do is it's going to put the value of counter in there once this button is clicked. Okay, well that's not much. That's not much use at this current time, is it? Because what we want that button to do is make that 0 go to a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3 and then a 4 each time we click it. So we need to do something to this counter. So if I put counter and then I do plus plus and put the semicolon in there, what's going to happen is this is going to increment by 1. Each time we click this, it's going to increment by 1. So let's save that, and now we try it. And now, there it happens. It works. So it's found the element of where the inner HTML, this is basically inserting into the HTML. And what is it inserting into the HTML? What this counter is. So it's initialized at 0. It's had 1 added to it. And now it's being used. So what happens if I push it again? It goes up again, because counter is storing that variable. And now it goes up. If I click this again, it goes up again and up again. So what happens if I take this out and we just have that as a counter? What happens now? If I click it, it just says not a number. Now, why would it say not a number? Because it's not been initialized. And that's why it needs to be initialized. So you've got to make sure that it is initialized to begin with. And now save it. It goes back to 0 and then it works normal. Well, now we've got to do something with the function down counter. So first of all, we've got to make sure that this links to the HTML. And we're going to look in our code. And it's got type button. It says what a button is. But it's not linking to anything. So we need to do on click. And then the name of the function. So what was the name of the function? The name of the function is down counter. And I pop that in there. Now, we go back to the JavaScript, and it's going to be the same sort of thing as this code here. So if we copy this and put this in here, if I leave it as it is, it's just going to do the same as the next button. So I want it to come down. So how am I going to do that? Before we do this, there's something I remembered. When I put counter, when down counter in here, we've got to put these brackets in. You see those brackets? They have to go in there to signify that it's a function. And then we save it. This here, and this has got double in here. Let's just make sure that it's working. So if I press it, yep, it goes up. But we want it to go down. If it's double plus, what happens if I put double negative? Now it's starting to go down. And if I click next, it goes back up. And then if I go previous again, it goes back down. That's useful because it can help us navigate through a list, and that list could contain all sorts of things like pictures of your recipes or pictures of your products, right? So that's just a simple little bit of code, and I probably wouldn't write it like that in real life. There would be lots of other stuff going on as well. I'd be wrapping the whole thing up in different functions and making objects, but I don't want to bog you down with all of that detail right now. I just want you to get used to like functions and how useful they can be. These previous and next buttons, how we link them, and then we're going to move on to putting something else in place of the ones and the zeros. Before we move on, there's something else I want to show you. So if we we've got double plus there. What if we want that counter to go up by, say, 3? So if I do plus equals 3, if I zoom in there, you can see I've now got plus, instead of plus plus, I've got plus equals 3. And I save that and I go over to the next and I click it and it goes up by 3. And then it goes up by 3 again. And it goes up by 3. And if I click the previous, that still goes down by 1. And then this goes up by 3. So you can increment it, and you can do the same with the negative. So if I do equals, let's do 5. So that goes up to 9. Now it comes down. It comes down by 5 each time. It doesn't have to be moving along 1 or 2 or 3. It can move along as many times as you like. It's called incrementing, and that's how you do it. And it is quite useful to do. So now the next part of this video is to move on to putting something interesting in, say, like an array, and then we navigate through that array using these buttons. The next part of this project is to build the array. Now, I'm going to leave the counter, this counter up here where it is, and I'm just going to add another span tag so that we can put the images into that span tag. So if I do, I've got it already prepared. So what have I put in here? What I've put in, let's zoom in, is a span tag. I've given it an ID of meal names, and I've given it initial value of none, and I've added a couple of spaces afterwards just to separate it out so that it looks nice over here. And here it shows up over here, right? Now we need to save that. Now in the JavaScript, we need to make the array. And the array is very simple to do. I've got one prepared here. Now I put it into the variable food and called the variable food. And now we denote the array by using these square brackets. And I've added in the item of meal 1. And I've got meal 2 and I've got meal 3. Okay, so you've got the idea. And they're separated by this comma. So we always separate them by a comma in this. All right. Now, these are just the names because we're going to check to make sure that it works. And then we're going to add images in there instead because we can do that. So now I could write a piece of code to go in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a function called vegan meals because they're going to be all images of vegan meals just because I need some images, no particular reason. Now, we call this function we then create the curly brackets. Now, what are we going to do with this function? What do we want it to do? Well, I want it to do more or less the same as this is happening here, don't I? So let's copy this and put this in here while I talk about it. And now, the reason why I want it to do this is because I wanted to find that span tag. So we're going to have to change this. And then I want it to insert something. Now, I don't want it to insert the counter. What I want it to do is insert this. So we put down here, we put down food. Yeah, and I want it to display what's in here. And we do that by using these square brackets. And then if I put 1 in there, 1 will display this meal here. 3 will be of no value. 2 will display this meal here. So how do I display 1? Well, the answer is 0. Well, our counter doesn't start at 0, it starts at 1. So what we have to do is we put counter and then -1. It's as simple as that. We do that because this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, right? Okay, in case you didn't see that. 1, that's going to be 0, this is going to be 1, and this is going to be 2. Those are what are called the indexes. So I've got this section sorted out down here. Now what I want is this section to change. Now what did we call it in that span tag? It's called meal name. So if I take that copy and then I pop it into here, and now it's changed. Now let's test it out and see how things are happening. Note that I've changed counter back to just ++, and I've changed counter down here to back to negative, like so. It just goes up once and decreases once, and we test it out. Let's see if it works. And now you see that we have like the counter that's showing the counter 1, and then we have meal 1, and then we have like 2, meal 2, and then we have 3, meal 3. Okay, now if we go again, it says undefined. So we need to find a way of telling it to not go further than what's in the array, than what's in the length of the array. Right, we're going to do that before we start putting in any photographs or anything like that. So how could we do that? It seems like we need some kind of if statement, don't we? If a condition is met. So I said we're going to put an if statement into control. So how do we do that? We want to do if, and then we have the condition. So what we're going to put in there, if something doesn't meet some sort of condition. So if counter is, now this one's going up, isn't it? So if counter is greater than 3, and then we're going to put what we want to happen, counter equals 3, and then we put the colon at the end there. Right, let's check that out. So it adds 1, adds another 1, adds another 1. Now last time it got to undefined. What's it going to do now? It doesn't do anything, right? But if I go back the other way, it breaches that boundary, so it goes to undefined. So we're going to do the same kind of thing here, aren't we? So we copy that, and we put this down here, and we change this to if counter is less than 1, we're going to change it to 1. Then we save that. Now let's do it. So if I go to pre, it just starts it off, but it won't go any further. So we go up, yeah, and like nothing is changing there. It's not going past the boundaries. Okay, so we could change this around. So that if I put 1 there, and if I put 3 there, now if I go to pre, it goes to 3, and we go that way round, and it gets to 1, and then it goes back to 3 again. So it keeps going round. Or if we go forward, then that keeps going round that way. Okay? That's how you can navigate the array and control how we interact with it, and so make sure it doesn't go outside of those boundaries. So let's add those photos in. We make an array for the images, and we're going to call that food images, and we're going to make an empty array. Now we're going to have to populate the array. So we do food images, and now we're going to want to add in the index. Anything in these square brackets, this is the index. Okay? And that means that it's at this position. So this is a different array, but this is position 0, index 0. This is index 1. This is index 2. So the first thing we do is to create the new image for this one. So we do new image, and that's a function. By the looks of it, it's an object that we're creating there. But we don't have to worry about that. We just have to remember that piece of code, and then we do something similar. Food image, and again position index 1 at the top here. That needs to be equals, sorry, and then we do dot source equals, and then the image location. Before we put this in, we need some images. So if we go to where we've got our main file, now I've put a file here, image, and in here I've got 4 images. I'm just going to use 3 for now, but I labeled it image, and it's in the same file. Now that's kind of important, otherwise you're going to start losing things. So we need to put the file in here. And it's going to go from the file that this is in. It's going to go from that folder, yeah, and then it's going to start looking for stuff. So we need to name the folder image, and then we use this file path divider, this slash, and then the name of the image that was in there. Well, I know what they are. This one is meal 1. And then we go and end this. Now, the next are going to be the same. So what we do is we just copy this and paste it. And the only thing I'm going to change is this is now for index 1. And this is going to be meal 2. I've made a mistake there. And this should be JPEG because you have to put the extension in of the file, otherwise it won't find it. Okay. So now I copy this, put it on the next line, and I'm going to change this to index 2, and this is going to be image 3. Right, so this is pretty much this part taken care of, as long as I haven't put any mistakes in. Now I want it to be called, and I want it to do something, but I want it to appear in this section here that I'm zooming into, so it's just beneath just beneath the buttons and what meal it is that it's saying. Let's save this for now, and I move back to the HTML page. Now I'm going to put another divider in. And then I'm going to put an image tag in, and I'm going to give that an ID equal to, let's see, if I do that, I'll stop that complaining. What should we call it? Image. And it's going to have source, and we're going to leave that open. Okay, and we save that. And now you can see that it starts to flash up here if I that's just the EDI. That's just the brackets does that, which is pretty good because it shows me that it's there. Now this part here is important. Image, we need to remember that. So we go down to this part here. Now this is going to be like very much the same as this part at the top here. We want it to insert something in a certain position. But this part we're going to change to the source. Yeah. And we're going to change this bit at the bottom. And that's going to be source as well. But this name, that's going to be image, isn't it? Image. Oops. Image. Now, this here, food, that's not the name of our function. The name of our function is this up here, isn't it? So we copy this, or our array, I should say, and then we pop it in here. This part is saying that it's going to be an index counter, whatever the counter is, -1, and I've already been over why we did the -1. And no, it hasn't. Oh dear. Right. So why is it not worked? So why is this not worked? I can see what I've done. This source, that should be SRC, and so if I change this one here as well, and I change all of these too. That was rather silly of me, wasn't it? So now, hopefully, if I've got them all, it should work. So if I save that, and now up comes the image as I originally expected it to happen. And if I click again, we get another image. And if I click again, we get another image. And if I click again, it will go back to the first image. And there it is. So that's how you do it. Scrap that bit. So now we have some images that are in an array, and they are being called by different functions, or at least these images in the array are being called by this function down here. And I have this other array here, which is carrying the labels of the food. And what I could do actually is like counter. I don't really need counter anymore. So this is how we do a comment. So now you know how to do a comment as well. And I can just take that out. So this is not going to change. So what should we do? Should we take that out? Yeah, like that. And then when I go to here, it's going to go meal one. It's just going to go through the menu. Okay. So that's how you can do it. No, scrap that. So now we have an array with the images in that we can display things. Now, perhaps someone would like to make an order, and they could order this, or maybe we want to extend the array. So what do we do then if we want to extend the array? Well, you think, well, I add something in here, and that's going to be meal 4. And I'm going to need to add another one of these. And we're going to change that to 3, that to 3, and we're going to call image 4. Now, it says here about this counter, isn't it? Counter, if it's greater than 3, go to 1. So this one's going to get missed. Now we could just change that to 4. But there's something else that I could do, something that's a little bit smarter. If we think about it, we've got this array up here called food, and it has a length. So if we put food dot length in there, and now we save it, and we can do the same down here, food dot length, we can see if it works. And we've got meal 1, meal 2, meal 3, meal 4, which is good. Meal 4's come up, and then what happens? It goes back to meal 1. Meal 2, meal 3, meal 4, and then back to meal 1 again. What happens if we go the other way? Does that work? Yeah, it's working as we wanted it. So now we don't have to worry about this code in the future if we add anything else to it, because we've told it to just to operate for as long as there is something actually in the array. So there we have like a nice little set of pictures that we can choose. We can choose a meal. Now that's kind of handy. But like I said, what if somebody wants to order something from here? And that's going to be the subject of the next video, is how we put in a section in there to make an order.